Welcome to Why I Left, a podcast exploring life-changing career moves. I'm your host, Brian Aquart. Join me as I chronicle real stories from real people about the bold decisions that transform their careers and lives. Let's dive in. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Why I Left. Today, we're exploring the journey of a leader who not only survived one of the toughest economic crises in recent history, but turned that experience into a powerful mission to help others succeed. Michael Dermer is a healthcare pioneer and serial entrepreneur. We'll talk about what it means to be an entrepreneur when the odds are stacked against you, and how passion, grit, and strategy can create opportunities even in the most challenging circumstances. He's been a driving force in reshaping how entrepreneurs are supported and empowered, and I'm excited to share his story with you. Let's go check it out. All right, welcome back. So our guest today is Michael Dermer, founder and CEO of The Lonely Entrepreneur. Michael is no stranger to high-stakes decisions and overcoming adversity. After leaving a prestigious career in mergers and acquisitions, Michael went on to create IncentOne, the first company in the US to reward people for healthy behaviors. His company grew to over 600 employees and pioneered an entire industry. In 2008, the financial crisis really almost destroyed everything he built in just 10 days. So through resilience and innovation, Michael not only survived, but led his company to a successful acquisition. Now, as the founder of The Lonely Entrepreneur, Michael is on a mission to empower 1 million entrepreneurs by providing them with the tools, knowledge, and support they need to turn their passion into success. Now, Michael's platform has become a lifeline for many entrepreneurs, especially those from underserved communities. So today we'll hear how he transformed a personal crisis into a mission that's changing lives across the globe. So Michael, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to this. And so, let's get right into it. But love to, you've had so many things that you've been involved with, and would love to, for our guests to hear a little bit more about your background. So this unconventional journey that you have from M&A law to pioneering healthcare incentives, what drove you to leave the legal world behind and really dive into entrepreneurship?
Brian, it was interesting because, my dad was a head of investor relations for a public company. And he said, listen, if you don't know what you want to do, you're going to run your own business someday. Go learn how money moves and deals get done. He's like, go play corporate lawyer for a couple of years. And so I did that. But Brian, I didn't really go into it thinking I was going to stay as a lawyer. I really always had the entrepreneurial mindset, but I was only attracted to kind of bigger things. And so, you just didn't leave, prestigious law firms like Wilkie Farr just for shits and giggles, right? And so I was literally, out to dinner one night with a friend of mine, a group of people, and one of my friend's wives pregnant. And she said, do you realize for every 10 women that don't follow their prenatal care, it costs the healthcare system $1 million. And one of my other buddies is like, wait a minute, if it really costs $1 million for 10 women, why wouldn't you just pay them all 10 grand? And that was it. And went back to my law firm. There was a bunch of talented deal makers there. I found I was a young guy in my 20s, and I went to a healthcare partner and I said, hey, what do you think about this? And he said, the healthcare industry knows exactly what they want to get everybody to do. Diabetics, women, men, young, old. We just can't get them to do it. And if you could get them to do it using incentives, the system could save billions. And as we like to say, that was the beginning of the end. Spent the next 6 months kind of business planning, and then left Wilkie Farr for a basement and started the company called IncentOne, which got to be known as the first company in the US to reward people for being healthy.
When you look back on those early days of building IncentOne, what were some of the kind of pivotal moments that helped shape your philosophy as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, a couple different things. Number one, I knew I didn't know anything about healthcare, and that helped, right? So right away, you say, okay, I know I'm going to need to find people that do that. It really, that perspective from day one, I know this is a complicated space. I'm going to need the people that are really experts in that. So that was number one. But number two, you realize that when you work in, and Brian, I know you're steeped in the space for a long time, right? When you work in complicated spaces like healthcare, the answer is not just, we're going to bring a better mousetrap. A lot of times, even when you have great solutions, these are complex marketplaces. And so what really helped me was the idea of really defining something completely new that had never been done before. We went to healthcare and said, hey, we have an idea. You should reward people for being healthy. They're like, you're out of your mind. We're never going to do this, right? We're never going to pay people to do the things that they should be doing. So it really helped me when I started to understand that people in certain industries that have been doing something the same way over and over again, we're not going to be so receptive to this. The way you did it, you had to really go about it some way. And we came out and said, maybe somewhat boldly, the most important thing in healthcare is incentives. And people were like, what are you talking about? They were like, there's diabetes, there's heart disease. And we're like, there are no shortage of solutions out there for diabetics. But the fundamental issue is you can't get people to change their behavior and take part in these things. None of that matters, right? There was huge investments coming out in digital health at the time, and you can create all the diabetes solutions in the world. But if you can't get people to participate or do them, it doesn't really matter. And so I think sometimes I learned, Brian, really quickly that if you went down the path that everybody else went down, you were just going to end up on the scrap heap of ideas. And so we knew we had to be bold in trying to, as we like to say at Long Intro, find a playground where nobody else is playing.
I love that. And, healthcare is notorious kind of slow on the uptick with some things, right? And so I'd imagine kind of getting over that hump and then finally getting over that hump was really a huge win. And now thinking about this, right? So you do all this work. It's now booming, right? Like you said, the first in the nation to do this. But now 2008 rolls around. And all this work you've done, it nearly collapses your company, right? So for those who may not know, right, in 2008, there was this huge financial crisis. What went on, during that time is truthfully something that's probably going to be studied for a long time. So eventually, though, it almost collapsed, but it didn't, right? And you went on to then have it sold to another industry innovator. So what did this experience, kind of these ebbs and flows of the market, really teach you about not only resilience, but also adaptability in business as a whole and entrepreneurship as a whole?
Yeah, I wish it was only ebbs and flows, Ryan. It was much more dramatic to that, as you know. We built, once we fought the fight and struggled early on to get the industry adopted, then it took off. And we grew like crazy, for the 5 years until 2007, 2008. Got offered an obscene amount of money in 2007 for the company. And we're like, why would we ever sell it? We're growing like crazy. It was a SaaS technology platform, heavily integrated into healthcare systems, which is so hard to get to. And then eventually got there. And then 2008 happens, the company is probably worth nothing. And so I think that at that point, it was really a lot of battling and scrapping and clawing. And what you really realized was, we had 800 employees and we had investors and I had family money in it and all that stuff. It was really about, what does it mean? What does it mean to be resilient? And what you really learned, what I learned certainly, was a couple of things. One, you really have to put pen to paper and execute a plan. Like if you stare at the ceiling every night going, what do I do? Or let me do the math never works, right? It's never going, what all your biggest customers are collapsing, right? That you spent years and years in building. If you're like, what if? That doesn't help you. What you have to really do is say, okay, what's the plan? How do I execute it? And take all of the energy, right? All that resilience and put it into the step-by-step thing that actually improve revenue, reduce cost, or whatever it may be. And that was really important because otherwise, if you just sat there and say, well, I wonder how this is going to go, it wasn't going to sound good. And that was literally after building it. We say it in our marketing materials, what we built in 10 years just got destroyed in 10 days. It's really true. If you remember 2008, it was just like COVID, like all of a sudden, right, it was gone. So you learn that. The other thing you learned was, and I said this explicitly to our team, and this is coming from a corporate lawyer, I was like, don't break any laws, don't hurt anybody. But other than that, it's all fair game, right? Because the world is not going to wait, even though an 800 person company from nothing seems like something in the grand scheme of Bear Stearns and AIG and all the things that were going on at the time, we were a rounding error. So it brings out, the ultimate creativity, and hopefully some of that entrepreneurial mindset of there's always a way. And the things that we tried and the things that we did, some of which worked and some of which didn't, had a real impact on the company. So if you just get in line, right? And it's like, we used to say you'd be like sitting on the beach reading the Wall Street Journal and a tsunami coming, right? And I guess you can try to swim away, but sometimes you got to go another way. So I think the crisis caused the ability to say, we got to think differently about this, and started to think about the whole business differently. And some of those things are the things that really ultimately saved. And then we started to grow again. And like you said, had a nice exit at the end.
No, without a doubt. So it's eventually bought by Welltalk. You are then kind of transitioned into this role of being an executive at Welltalk, and you stay there for a little bit, but eventually you kind of pivot, right? And you then go on while you're at Welltalk, you kind of go to founding the Lonely Entrepreneur. How did that shift from working, at the new company Welltalk to eventually founding Lonely Entrepreneur? How did that shift align with your long-term vision?
After that whole experience of IncentOne, build it, save it, sell it, and then, having the privilege to work at Welltalk for a little bit, I wasn't really thinking about my next thing yet. I really wasn't. I was just kind of digesting and taking it in. There's a lot of pride in getting through that crisis, with this group of people that I worked with. I wasn't really thinking about anything about it. And again, I'm only interested in bigger things, right? Bigger, innovative things. So rewarding people for being healthy had, the ability to not only be a good business, but ultimately change society somehow. And the only thing I was doing was in New York City, where I live. And the only thing I was doing was helping friends who were starting and growing their businesses for fun. I wasn't thinking about the next thing. And one of them said to me, being an entrepreneur is really lonely. And I was like, huh. But honestly, I kind of forgot about it. And about 2-3 weeks later, I was walking down the street with a friend of mine in Union Square, New York. And I said lonely entrepreneur to him. And he said, what did you say? And I said, lonely entrepreneur. He's like, oh my God, that's brilliant. What is that? I'm like, what do you mean? It's a phrase. And he goes into a Starbucks. I was like, what is he doing? He goes into a Starbucks, packed Starbucks, and he goes, watch this. And I'm like, what is he going to do? And he yells at the top of his lungs, who here is lonely entrepreneur? And I swear to you, everybody put their hand up. What I realized really quickly was that, oh, you're in New York City with all these talented, hardworking people. And most of them, sitting in a Starbucks, it's not translating. That passion and energy is not translating into success. And I was like, if you could wake up and fix that every day, that would really be worth fixing. And that's what really led to the whole thing. And soon after that, you're like, okay, that sounds good, but how do you do that? Right. And that's when, Brian, as you know, I started to look around at, if you got plopped in any town, USA, or really throughout the world and said, start your own business, where would you go? Just to realize that there wasn't an organized set of resources. There wasn't a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs to do that. And at that point, Brian, I was a SaaS technology guy at that point. So I was like, why isn't there a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs that you could go to and get everything that you needed? And it just didn't exist. And so it was exciting for us is not holding this brand name that everybody. Imagine if you had a platform you could give to anybody, regardless of the stage they're at. And that was interesting because then we would have the opportunity to give it to, frankly, anybody in the world who was trying to, go down this path. And so it was a very, very organic experience that led to it.
No, I love that. And, curious to kind of take you back to that Starbucks, right? Like when after your friend kind of yells that out and you see all these hands go up, what was kind of going through your mind at that time? And then kind of what happened afterwards? Like, did everyone just kind of go back to doing what they were doing, or like what? I'm just very curious about that because I love that story.
Brian, it's interesting. It happened both the dinner when my friend said, why not just pay $10,000 to each woman? And yes, you have to explore it a little bit and stuff like that. But I was like you look around and you go, I haven't seen this. Right. And so both of those experiences were very much the same. And so when those folks said that, I was like, oh my God, you're in one of the most dynamic cities in the world. And all these people are smart and hardworking and they're all struggling and they're sitting right next to each other and they start having the same problems. And so at first you're like, what's the need? And you just knew what was compelling to me was the need was so dramatic. Everybody was starting a business. Everybody had a side gig. Everybody's kid, 60% of high school kids now want to start their own. Why aren't we fixing that as a society, as a world, not just US? So that's the first thing is a really compelling problem that isn't getting fixed. And then you'd go, wow, that would be fun to do. Because the thing that we really took seriously was the underlying passion that people have for this. This is not just businesses, right? This is, it's not a job, it's an identity. And so many people do it. But imagine if there was something, it's the joke where they talk about if you jumped out of a plane and the parachute didn't open 9 times, you'd stop jumping out of the plane. And that's what happens. People go out there and we did a real disservice in the US, and I suspect in other places in the world, because we said to entrepreneurs, as long as you have passion, grit, and a good idea, you're good. You don't need to know anything. So Brian, you're in the healthcare field. If I came to you and said, hey, I'd love to go over to Northwell tomorrow and perform heart surgery, you would be like, oh, Michael, you went to medical school? And I'd be like, nah. And people would say things, well, as long as you fail fast, just go fail fast. I'm like, you realize that means I'm going to kill the patient, right? Like fail fast. And that's what we said to entrepreneurs. I just saw not only an opportunity to fix the fact that there are people that had their heart and soul that they were putting into these things. And if you could be the steward of that in a real genuine way by putting resources in their hand at scale and helping them the right way. So, it in a lot of ways, I've been very fortunate to kind of very organically just stumble upon these ideas.
No, I love that. I'd love to dig a little bit more into the Lonely Entrepreneur because I'm a big fan of the platform. And something you just said, I want to pick up on. You talk about entrepreneurship being an identity rather than a job. And so how does the Lonely Entrepreneur platform really help individuals embrace and succeed in that identity of entrepreneurship?
There's so many people out there that, Brian, just kind of take their passion and run with it. And entrepreneurship is really a series of tons and tons and tons of skills. So when we looked at how can we really help everybody, we're like, what do they need? And we took a look at it and we said, okay, what does an entrepreneur really need? And we concluded that it was knowledge, tools, and support. So knowledge is what's an income statement? What do I do when I'm freaking out? So we built modules that people can have access to on everything. Business first issues, personal issues. As you know, we've expanded that to support Black entrepreneurs, Hispanic entrepreneurs, turning citizens, military. They need tools, right? How do I get the marketing templates and legal agreements I need? Stuff you have to go all over the place to find. And thirdly was on-demand support, like support when I need it. The idea actually came out of a Facebook group. If you think about, a mom goes into a Facebook group and says, who has the best dry cleaner? And somebody answers them. We're like, why couldn't we do that for entrepreneurship? And so that's what we did. We basically created on-demand support where people get their questions answered real time and can sign up for unlimited online group coaching. But really more than anything, it's the fact that's all in one place. And by having that, I could give it to virtually anybody. The high school kid that's thinking about it, right? Somebody that's left corporate America thinking about somebody that has a 13-person company that's trying to grow it. Like we wanted to try to help all of those people and do something that was scalable and consistent and give them what they really need, which is I need it now. Like in no other place, no other domain do we say you have to go to a physical place or you have to sign up for a class when you need it, right? If somebody's go book ticket on an airline, they go down to a travel center, they carry you away. They think you're nuts, right? But in entrepreneurship, we're like, you have to ask questions between 1 and 2 o'clock on Thursday. You're like, what are you talking about? So I think, Brian, just coming at it and going, forget about what exists today. What do people actually need? They need information there when they need it organized for them in a way they can trust, and they need help whenever they need it. And that was very clear to us, the impact that we can have by creating that.
No, I absolutely love that. And people love things that are streamlined, right? So the fact that everything is in one place, I'm sure is really beneficial for a lot of folks. And the other piece I really like is that the platform supports entrepreneurs truthfully at every stage, right? You'd mentioned from high school student, right, to someone with 13-person company trying to scale it. And truthfully, like you mentioned, from a lot of different diverse backgrounds. And so can you share some success stories where the platform has had really a profound impact on underserved communities that like some of the ones you mentioned?
Yeah, one of our strategies over long, Brian, I mean, you stated part of it was to serve people at every stage. And one of the challenges is that everybody has different skill sets, backgrounds, ideas, capabilities. And so we built it really, really broad to be able to do that. But specifically, with respect to underserved communities, we're like, there are things about being Michael Dermer, who had, privilege and went to good colleges and law schools. But what about for the Black community and the Latin community that face very specific challenges and opportunities that exist? So we added content and did that. So we partnered with Black leaders and launched our Black initiative. We partnered with Hispanic leaders and launched our Hispanic initiative. Say, listen, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff, income statement's an income statement. Then there's like pattern bias and all these different types of things specific to Black entrepreneurs. And so we really had the philosophy that we can serve everybody because we're not just being general, but we're being very specific. I'll never forget the story that when we launched our Black initiative, we did it with the Milwaukee Bucks on Martin Luther King Day up in Milwaukee. If you remember, the Bucks are really post-George Floyd, very, very active in social justice. And I'll never forget it. It got launched and amazing. We gave it to 1,000 Black entrepreneurs. And I went home to New York City where I lived. And in my mailbox were these 20 letters, but letters written, Brian, in like handwriting or like with old school typewriters, right? And every one of the return addresses was a prison. like X correctional facility or whatever. And I opened these letters, and there were letters from actual prisoners inside correctional facilities in the United States that, I guess because the Bucks had so much presence, it got picked up by the national prison newspaper about the Black entrepreneurship, and literally had people write to me personally, I don't know how they found me, that said, listen, Michael, I heard about the Black Entrepreneurship. I've been in Corey for all the time. You got to go online, or I got like a 10-page business plan on like Lucy. Just knew that you could have an impact and the ability to, help people in those circumstances and give them everything they need. There's so many examples of people that have raised a ton of money and gone on Shark Tank and probably more importantly, other than the sexy stuff, taking their business from like the 1-person business to the 9-person business, right? They're baking cookies and they just want to go to the next level. We all talk about like the sexy ones, but really for almost everybody in America, it's your neighbor, it's the restaurant, it's the guy or gal around the corner just trying to do a little thing. And, like something like 90% of the businesses in the US have less than 10 employees, right? And so you just watch them get incrementally better, which leads to greater sales and greater profits. And we've had last year, 81% of the people on the platform grew revenue. And so you just see that every day. And it's incredibly humbling to see that we're, making some kind of difference that way.
No, that's awesome to hear. Scaling entrepreneurial support is really a major theme of the Lonely Entrepreneur. And how do you see your company's platform addressing gaps in kind of the current ecosystem of support for small businesses in cities like New York, right? Because typically it's, different chambers and other, little things here and there, but they don't offer, to your point, from a scaling standpoint, they don't offer as much as you do. So how do you see your company really addressing those gaps?
Yeah, I think, Brian, if you go back, 20 years, the ecosystem set up to support entrepreneurs was because, 1 of 1,000 people did it. Right. And so to walk into a chamber of commerce or a workspace or a university program or small business development center was fun. Right. Now I don't want to say it's everybody, but it's almost everybody. Right. Somebody either is one or is related to one or married to one or is friends with one. And so the existing ecosystem is incredibly well intentioned for the people that quote unquote walk in the door. So chambers and incubators and small but it's not really designed for a modern model to say, I need information when I need it and I need help when I need it. And so what we're trying to do with platforms, not only provide the entrepreneurs what they need, but actually help this ecosystem to be able to provide chambers of commerce, incubators and accelerators and SBA, a capacity they don't currently have. If you go to a small business development center, they'll have program officers. They're helping the people that interact. And it's great. Or you go to SCORE, they'll have retired executives. All that is super helpful, but they're not able to help them every minute of every day. We're trying to not only help the entrepreneur, but to help the players in the ecosystem and frankly, the economic development organizations and the charitable foundations that say, hey, if we believe empowering people with entrepreneurial skills is one way to help them lead their most fulfilling lives, whether they call themselves an entrepreneur or they're a member of the Black community or they're somebody that's formerly incarcerated or somebody that left the military, if you believe that, we're hoping to provide those funders the opportunity to empower not only those entrepreneurs, but the ecosystem that's working so hard to try to empower. If you talk to an urban league, we work with a bunch of urban leagues, they are working their butt off to try to help their community. They are not set up to help the thousands and thousands of Black entrepreneurs that want to do their thing. So hopefully we're able to provide them with a capacity that they don't otherwise have.
And curious about that. So what would that look like? Let's say someone's listening and they're like, I'd love to maybe support and maybe fund something like this. Let's say someone's like, how much could I donate to support, or how much would it cost to help 100, 500, 1,000 entrepreneurs? What does that look like?
So Brian, one of the ways that we specifically wanted to design it is we wanted people that were interested in solving this problem not to have to write a check for $10 million. Obviously, there's bigger funders that think about systemic change and capacity and things like that. We wanted, if someone said, listen, I know what it's like to be an entrepreneur. It's hard. I've got people that I'd love to be able to help. It starts as low as $15,000 for 25 entrepreneurs, $25,000 for 50 entrepreneurs, and it goes up from there. So anybody that's interested in supporting, whether it's an individual or a corporate or a philanthropy, we let them decide the number of entrepreneurs they'd like to help and the type, right? So they might say, I grew up on Long Island in a town. I'd love to give it to my high school, right? I was in the military. I'd love to give it to military folks. I'm a member of the Black community. I'd love to help other Black entrepreneurs. So starting at $15,000, right, you can help 25 entrepreneurs for our platform for a year through our nonprofit. And we also give them the ability to select the specific entrepreneurs they want to help. And we hope is that collective community effort, right, can be a lot of people and then just providing help to as many entrepreneurs as we can.
I love that. I think that to your point around being able to scale something like this, that kind of buy-in, quote unquote, could really be beneficial. So I appreciate you sharing that. As we kind of move a little bit here, I love this section I like to call my advice section, right? Because there are so many people who are truthfully interested in entrepreneurship. I read a stat probably it's like a year or so ago where almost 50% of the new businesses that are being started in the US are actually being started by women, right? And so I see a lot of these trends happening in the space. And so what do you believe are some of the most common misconceptions that aspiring entrepreneurs have about turning their passions into success?
Yeah, I think as I said before, Brian, this whole idea that if you have passion, grit, and a good idea, you're good is enough. And it's not. Being an entrepreneur is a whole series of skills. Everybody has kind of different skill sets and different levels of capabilities. I think probably the biggest challenge is that entrepreneurs don't know necessarily what it's supposed to look like. So for example, when you and I went out today, we both knew that when we got dressed, we needed a shirt, pair of pants, pair of shoes, right? Like we may not have known an exact shirt that I was going to wear, right? But we knew that we probably had a need to put a shirt on. With entrepreneurs, they don't necessarily know what that universe is, right? So if you're a chef or a fashionista or a technologist, right, you have your craft, right? But the craft is different from a business. So a lot of times with great capability in our crafts, think about that. Think about, your world, right? Think about the medical world. Those people might be able to perform heart surgery, but does that mean they can run a business? I think the first thing that entrepreneurs have to understand is you have to understand what composes a business. Like what are the elements of a business that you're going to need to have? Now, put aside how you get them and who you're going to get them from and whether it's you or somebody else. It's almost like, you walk into a car dealership and they don't know that the car has 4 tires, right? And they just start driving, right? So I think the biggest thing, Brian, is just if entrepreneurs could just recognize, I have my craft, got it. Just like I said, I don't know anything about healthcare. I just know I need some help there. But if you knew what the car needed to have, then you could, okay, now let me take this passion and energy and this money and all the stuff I'm going to put into it. But let me make sure I'm doing it because I actually know the elements of a car. And then I'll just use my creativity to hire people, raise money, get resources for free, but to help me solve what the car needs. And I think that's the biggest thing. We just take our craft. We're good at it. We're good at being a chef. And then we run. And all of a sudden you go, oh shit, I don't think anything about running a restaurant. And that's where people, that's why you see so many failures, I think, in the US.
Yeah, without a doubt. And for those who are facing tough financial or personal challenges, like the ones you came across in 2008, what advice would you offer them about persevering and really finding opportunities amid crisis?
I always think that the most important thing in the year 2024 is what we call finding a playground where nobody else is playing. We all operate in such a cluttered world. There's no space that doesn't have intense competition. And we all believe in our cookies, like, my cookies are the best, right? And yet we go out into this world, right? And we're like, well, I have great cookies, but everybody says they have great cookies. So we're not even fighting competitors. We're fighting the clutter of everybody saying the same thing to the same people. And so not just in a crisis, but the ability to say, have I really found my playground? Take example of rewarding people for being healthy, right? At the time, there were reward programs everywhere, right? Credit cards, airlines, hotels, like there wasn't a consumer company that didn't have a reward program. All we did was apply it to healthcare. And then you go, I can't find that, right? And when you find that, you're selling apples and everybody else is selling oranges. And it takes a lot of work and effort to try to find that. I'll give you an example. It's just fresh in my mind. Is in Milwaukee, there's a guy who's a massage therapist, incredibly passionate about his craft and really into it and really liked helping people, but he was struggling because, like how many massage therapists in Milwaukee? There's tons. So we're like, tell us a little bit about yourself. And he starts telling a story, and he just says off the cuff that he did a lot of jujitsu as a kid. And he actually says, well, I actually incorporate some of that into my massage practice. We're like, hold on a sec. So how many massage therapists in Milwaukee? 1,000. How many incorporate jujitsu? 1. Right? Now, all of a sudden, he's got his own playground. So I think a lot of the crisis that results from entrepreneurs trying and working and, working, 24 hours a day and maxing out their credit cards comes because we don't do that first. We think we have great cookies, which we all do in our own way. But if you don't do that, and if you don't, like he thinks he's the best massage therapist in the world, right? He believes in it. He cares about it, but he was struggling. And that's what caused, put aside COVID and 2018, Brian, like those types of crises. But if you don't get that playground right in a cluttered world, you'll work just as hard as the next guy or gal, right? But remember, we're all using the same marketing tools. We're all using AI. Like, why does somebody win, right? You have to really take the time to be able to do that. And if you find that, and when you find it, like for us, why wasn't there a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs? People go, how you find out? It's like, oh yeah. It's like the famous story of, Clive Owens when he discovered Whitney Houston, like used to get like at the time CDs and tapes. I'm dating myself, right? And somebody asked him, like, how do you know you get all these things? Like, how do you know you found a star? And he goes, I tap my feet. You're like, what do you mean? When I listen to the music, it makes me tap my feet. Like when you find your playground, you just know it. And when you know it, you're not competing with everybody else. You are defining the rules. Like the playground analogy came from when you go up to a playground, there's a bunch of rules, right? And it says you can't be here at 2 and like whatever. When we did rewarding people for being healthy, there was Visa and MasterCard and American Express and all these other reward programs. They just weren't touching healthcare. So we then get to define it. And when you get to define it, that's when people come to you because you're setting the rules. You understand what the insight is. So I would really encourage everybody, if you haven't found that, right? If you're like, well, my cookies are better than the next one. Well, it's got to be more than that because everybody says they have great cookies. To us in the year 2024, that's the most important skill you have to have.
That resonates with me so tough, even as I think about this show, right? Because virtually seems like everybody has a podcast, right? And Lord knows, sometimes they need to make the podcasting equipment a bit more expensive, right? Because everybody seems to have one and not everyone needs one, right? But when I think about like my playground, right? Because when I got into this, it was, does the world need another podcast? I was like kind of self-doubt and all these other things. I was like, you know what? No one's really talking about how and why people resign. Like they may be talking about it themselves, like what other people are doing. But to have people tell their own stories, I'm not hearing that enough. So, it's what you just say this, like finding your playground. I think that's the process. I know that's the process I actually went through because I wanted to be very specific and tailored in what my message was about. The show was and still is, it's not about me, right? It's about telling the stories of others because this taboo topic of something that we all have done and will continue to do, resignations, is something that we don't talk about. And so I love that. And as you're sitting there talking, I'm like, oh, this is kind of the process I was going through when I first launched this thing. And nonetheless, here we are. So I appreciate you sharing that, like the importance of finding your own playground. Definitely.
Think about, Brian, the idea of so many people leave corporate America for whatever reason, right? They leave or they lose their job. Imagine if you had one podcast to go, well, I left, right? And so I think it's really finding those spots, and it doesn't have anything to do with the product, right? The product and the podcast and the tools, that'll all come to light, but it's are you identifying where somebody goes, oh wow, I haven't heard that before. I mean, think if I came to you with an idea and I said, you're going to get in a stranger's car and they're going to take you somewhere and you're going to pay them. You would be like, that's a cross spree. That's not a business.
Right.
Right. Or here, even better. Right. So I have an idea. We're going to do a musical about a historical figure that 90% of America doesn't really know. Right. From an era where it was all white guys. And we're going to do it with Black and hip hop. You'd be like, that's the stupidest. Alexander who Hamilton? That's the stupidest. And it became the number 2 gross. That is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Nobody cares about Alexander Hamilton. We're going to hip hop it.
Right.
Right. And it became the number 2. Right. So that's the problem, is defining a playground is literally defining something completely new. If you know anybody who's a Jimmy Buffett fan, Jimmy Buffett went to Nashville. Right. And they're like, we don't get you. Like, we don't get this. Like, it's kind of like goofy island music. So he's like, I'm just going to create my own. And he's like the 3rd wealthiest musician. You don't think of him, right? You think of others, because he owns that whole space. He owns Margaritaville. Like, and so the hard part for an entrepreneur is, for most of the most innovative ideas, people are going to say, I don't get that, because it hasn't been there before by very definition, right? It's like, it's the famous, Steve Jobs tells a story all the time about Henry Ford. You ask people what they needed when Henry Ford started to create the first real cars at scale, was they would say, I need faster horses, right? And so for every car, there was 5,000 people with horses. So I think the hard part is that a lot of times, like, it's something that doesn't exist. And in the year 2024, I think, while that was good before, now it's essential, because the world is so cluttered. And you're talking about the podcast domain. It's so cluttered in every domain that if you don't define that spot, you can't just go out there and say, we have this thing called the Saturn principle, Lonely Entrepreneur. The Saturn principle is, if you got dropped here from Saturn and somebody said, start an accounting business, what would your website say? Well, it would say the same thing everybody else said. It would be, my clients love us, we're cheap, we do it on time, we're experts. Like, so when everybody's from Saturn and everybody's doing that, why would you win? You have to define that playground, and that becomes the thing that becomes your North Star, that when you wake up every day, or wake up, as we like to say, before the alarm rings, sometimes because you're worried and sometimes because you're excited, right? You feel like you're getting up and you're leaning into something that you think is a winner, as opposed to thinking what many people feel who haven't done this, which is, somebody has more money, somebody's doing it cheaper, somebody's doing it faster, all the things that, weigh on us as entrepreneurs.
No, definitely. And, as you think looking forward now, what type of impact are you hoping to have in the future?
It's been so rewarding to watch each of the entrepreneurs we see get benefits from the platform, because they're getting help every day, like minute by minute, day by day. They're almost by definition getting better. It's not hard to help because you're with them every single day. Listen, our number of 1 million, which is a million goal, it's a lot bigger than that now. We're having conversations about providing it to whole cities. For example, cities like Memphis, great American cities that had terrible couple of years with crime and economic development problems and things like that. And so we're really trying to your point about ecosystem, Brian, we're really trying to partner with the philanthropic leaders and economic development leaders to say, listen, if we believe that job growth and personal empowerment depends on people doing their own thing, and especially, Brian, as you and I talked about, in underserved communities that didn't go to Bucknell and Northwestern, right, aren't going to have the same opportunities, or grow up in certain neighborhoods and have certain systemic challenges that I didn't face. If you believe that, next iteration for the lonely entrepreneur, and really for, I think, our society, is for the philanthropic and corporate and economic development leaders to go, how can we actually help people as they need it day to day, to realize and have that personal fulfillment that comes from kind of doing their own thing. So our aspirations are very large in terms of, trying to help all of those that need it. But obviously it requires the support of people that are really strategically thinking about how to solve this issue. No,
I love that. And I wish you, continued success with that, because there's so many good things having delved into the platform that it's just a lot there. So I look forward to kind of following the continued journey there. And so now, as you think about this next part here, is something I added for season 3, got a lot of great feedback on. And so now I'm going to flip the script. And what's one question you have for me that I could potentially answer?
Yeah. And I think, Brian, you and I talked about this a little bit. I think you've done so much, right, in your professional career, and now in the podcast, and in your personal career. When you think about what is really your driving force, what do you feel like is your driving force every day?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So now what's great that's happening currently, both personally and professionally, is that I've become really clear on the type of impact I'm trying to have. And I phrase it as, on the professional side, redefining healthcare education. But I think overall, it's really about redefining education, period. And then you can throw in a variety of themes that attach to that. So what does that look like? Day to day in healthcare, it's around, high school students, early careerists, finding opportunities and better understanding the types of career paths that exist within healthcare. So I'm waving the healthcare flag. Outside of that, it's things like obviously entrepreneurship, but also too, when you think about the job landscape as a whole, I want people to know that, especially nowadays with remote work and all these types of things, there's this kind of loneliness epidemic that's happening, both on the male and female side, but just this loneliness epidemic that's happening. And people are going through so much. And in my case, they're at times thinking about career transitions, don't know what to do, feel alone, don't want to talk about it because it's kind of taboo. The platform that I'm creating now, I want to help you with that. I want to help people with that. I want you to say, look, there are plenty of people who have made career pivots, career transitions throughout their lives. Here's what you can learn from them. And so I hope you come to this platform and you find something that's for you. And so the impact I'm trying to have around education is really, in this case, breaking taboo topics around resignations. There are entrepreneurs who have come on the show. There are corporate folks who have come on the show. I've had therapists and all types of people who have kind of graced us with their presence. And what I'm hopeful is that, and some of the feedback I get, which is great, is that you are able to find somebody's story who resonates with you, and then be able to act on some of the advice that they've given. And some of the things that's great is that, one of the reasons I do the advice section is I've had people reach out to me and say, you know what, I've been thinking about X for a long time. And this conversation with so-and-so was really that push that I need. I knew what I needed to do, but something about it, I just wasn't doing it. But after hearing him or hearing her, I just needed that push. So thank you for interviewing them. It really had an impact on me. And when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, oh, this is amazing, right? This is great. You never know what people are going through, how conversations are going to land for folks. But what I can be what I'm very happy about and very grounded in is that I'm providing this platform around information, inspiration, and hopefully some motivation, right? And so we're doing that in this case, educating in that regard, and then professionally doing something similar in the healthcare space. And so what it looks like for me is just continuing down that theme. And really what it's about now, both with the show and with what I do day to day, is expansion. And so how do I continue to impact larger groups, right? More people, right? And so that could come to the form with expanding initiatives or partnering with other organizations or being on boards that touch other communities and other regions to continue having this impact. But what I'm very, very certain of is that I have found a nice niche to kind of keep pushing forward. And I'm happy about that because my career has taken a very scenic road. I'm happy that I've kind of I've seen some okay, this is a nice direction to go in, because it feels, everybody wants to be able to do something that has a greater impact on society as a whole. And I'm coming into that, which feels awesome.
It's so interesting, Brian, because I don't know if you know, but a little while back, the Surgeon General came out with a report on loneliness. And it said that the loneliness epidemic in the United States has the risk of having the same health impact of smoking daily. And if you read the report, it's really amazing. And obviously, it's a coincidence that we're called the lonely entrepreneur. But to your point, if you look at the intersection of what you just expressed about your passion and our work, is at the end, it's individual fulfillment, right? And individual realization, right? Of the potential that you have. And especially in underserved communities, things like education, things like entrepreneurship are some of the only places where opportunity, right, can meet potential. So much it doesn't have education, if it doesn't have the ability to do your own thing. If you're an inner city kid, or you're an immigrant that came here from another country and you need to do your own thing, right? And that's the only way that you can make it. Hopefully you're able to get into educational institution and do all the things that you and I were able to do. But to your point, the idea of being able to take that own personal journey that you have and act on it, right? In a way, like you said, from an education perspective or an entrepreneurship perspective, I think you and I share a lot in common when it comes to that.
Definitely. So look, I just want to thank you. This was a great conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Huge fan of your story, of the work, of the platform, and would love for you to share where our listeners and truthfully potential donors, philanthropists, right, can find you and support some of the work that you're doing.
Sure. And thank you again, Brian, for such a thoughtful conversation and the work that you're doing, amplifying this. So for the individual entrepreneurs out there, just go to lonelyentrepreneur.com, and the platform is something you can get for $99 a month if you're an individual. For those of you that might want to support in a broader way, the philanthropies, economic development organizations, corporations, when it comes to your community mission, you can just go to tlefoundation.org, which is our nonprofit. And there's the opportunity to look at the different ways that you can contribute. But with us, Brian, it's pretty easy. You type Lonely Entrepreneur, you'll find us across all the different channels that exist out there.
No, that's awesome to hear. And so thank you for that. We'll definitely make sure to put that in the show notes. And look, that'll do it for today's episode. I really, really just want to thank Michael Dermer again for joining us today. Like I said, I'll put his info in the show notes. And I hope you all have a great week. I hope, for the entrepreneurs who are out there, you pick something up from this, and definitely check out the platform if you're interested. And we'll definitely see you all next time. So Michael, thank you again for joining us. Thanks for listening to Why I Left. Join us next time for more inspiring stories about growth, resilience, and transformation. Visit us online at www.whyileft.co. That's whyileft.co. And subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the Alive Podcast Network. See you soon.